Well, it is truly an honor to be joined by two more distinguished speakers. First, Resolution Ambassador Ann Veneman and Advisory Board Co-Chair Whalen. We will now draw on their very rich cross-sectoral experience to talk about the support of youth-led ventures that have grown to scale. So first, can you talk a little bit about how public, private, and civil society organizations support the acceleration and sustainability of youth-led ventures, and also how the sectors are evolving in response to the rise of youth entrepreneurs and their very firm expectation that innovation and growth and capital must inherently be tied to social responsibility?
Well, that was a big question. I want to pick up on a little bit about what's been said in the previous panels, and Cheryl talked a little bit about the suspicion of a lot of the different sectors. People that are aid workers have traditionally seen their roles as sort of, we do things differently, we don't work with the private sector, they aren't out to help people. But I see a tremendous sea change happening, and I think it's partly driven by this movement of young people in social business. I also think it's driven by a continuous realization that aid per se has not worked, and we really need to engage economic empowerment for sustainability. And so I see government, for example, in some of the aid agencies. You look at USAID now funding things like Feed the Future, where they're partnering with the private sector. You didn't see much of that before. Of course, in the private sector, you've got the social business sector, which our speakers have talked so articulately about, but it's also a driving force on the side of larger, older businesses to engage in creating shared value, for example, where you're looking at how to build value for shareholders and value for society. And then, of course, on the NGO side, I think the larger NGOs, they're a little slower to come to the table, but the newer NGOs are looking for ways to be a partner. And so I see a lot of change taking place in a very short period of time, and I think really for the better, but I think there's still a lot of ways to go.
At Rockefeller, when we think about global solutions, we see our responsibility as being twofold. Number one, to catalyze global solutions, and also to set up a pathway for their sustainability beyond our involvement. And so for us, we think about how philanthropic dollars are different than dollars from the private sector or from government, and they are so much more flexible. They're also a lot smaller than all the dollars that are spent by government or the private sector. And so what we do is we look at some challenge that we want to solve. And when we do that, from the beginning we are working with both the public and the private sector, because those are the channels by which this will continue once we are no longer involved. And that approach to it, I think, is a relatively new one to philanthropy. And it's not unique to us by any means, but I think in the past decade plus, a lot of foundations have understood the largesse of philanthropy alone will not get us to sustainable solutions. And we put program-related investments where we are doing debt or equity investments into companies at the core of a lot of our initiatives. We also make grants to private institutions as well, but we understand that different instruments are needed to be able to address different kinds of challenges. Just reflecting on my time in government, we thought a lot about at City Hall, how do you both take the resources of government and make them available to innovators, and also how do you sort of orient the work of government so that it is open to the work of innovators. So we spent a lot of time on open data, for example, where how do you bring all this information that government has that's always been behind a wall to make it available through things like the Big Apps Challenge and other opportunities like that, where companies can look at that data and create solutions that can provide information and insight on issues of education and health and the environment.
So youth entrepreneurship is often fueled by principles of autonomy and creativity and idealism. How can large institutions help to protect the things that make these enterprises so special once they've matured?
Well, I think one of the things that large institutions can do is look at where innovation is taking place and help to support that. I think these are the kinds of things that larger organizations can help then to see the model, scale it up, and provide funding so that you can expand this kind of thing.
At Rockefeller, when we build our initiatives, one of the things we do is, because we have this coalition of partners that we work with across all sectors, we try to be really clear about what it is that our overall goals are, and then some specific targets underneath that. And when we decide we want to work with somebody, we have faith in that institution, and we have some sense of, there's a clarity of kind of purpose and ability to execute with that institution. And so when we've worked with a lot of social entrepreneurs, we've said, here's the target we're going for, we trust you, go get it. And so I would say for anyone who is in an institution, a large institution like Tracey was referring to the extent that you can create some really clear targets and some kind of rules of the game, and then letting your partners get to it, I think is a really powerful and empowering approach to how you do business.
When I was at UNICEF, we started a little unit, an innovation unit. And that unit now had, as of 2011, created something called U-Report, which they now have 1 million users around program countries engaging as youth in community issues, in what they're concerned about. And this can go and be a pulse of communities for government officials, for people looking at how to improve their own communities. And I think this is also the kind of building block that can help build the institutional knowledge in young people that they can do things to make a difference.
Organizations like UNICEF and Rockefeller have legacies as enduring leaders in their sectors. What practices or lessons should young entrepreneurs borrow to ensure that their enterprises are also enduring, and even once they're gone?
We work in a world where the partners that we will collaborate with will change and recombine over time. And so the lessons I would encourage you to keep in mind are, how do you make sure that the world understands what it is that you do in as clear and concise a way as possible? And how do you also make sure that you remember that someone that you meet tomorrow may be a collaborator and a partner for you 6 months or a year or 10 years down the road, and we live in this fundamentally interconnected world, and for us, 100 years later, we're still coming back to people that we worked with a century ago.
You also, as an organization, need to be able to adapt to the changing times. And you need to be willing to not be so invested in your own organization and brand that you can't partner with others or even merge with others with similar missions.
Thank you both.